When Jasmine, a talented but overlooked black ballerina, is unexpectedly thrust into the spotlight to replace a famous dancer at an elite charity gala, the wealthy Edwards family and their guests are less than pleased with the change. But as Jasmine steps onto the stage, her every move threatens to shatter the biases they hold, if only they can see beyond the surface. Will her performance change their hearts, or will prejudice win out in the end? Before we get started, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more exciting content, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Now, let's dive in. The morning sunlight filtered through the large bay windows of the Edwards home, casting a golden hue over the elegantly decorated living room. Olivia Edwards sat at her grand oak desk, flipping through the last-minute details for the evening's gala. It wasn't just any event, it was the highlight of the year, an affair that showcased the family's influence in the community. This year, however, felt different. The tension surrounding the event wasn't just due to the guest list or the lavish decorations. It was about the family's legacy, now under the spotlight in a way Olivia hadn't anticipated. For years, the Edwards family had hosted the annual charity gala to raise funds for the arts. It was a cause Olivia was passionate about, or at least a cause she knew would reflect well on the family. The arts had always been seen as a sophisticated and safe domain, free of the uncomfortable social discussions that plagued other causes. This year, they were honoring a foundation that supported underprivileged youth by providing scholarships for dance programs. Olivia's favorite part of the evening was always the ballet performance, and this year's star attraction was Clara, a well-known ballerina who had been making waves on the national stage. Clara's ethereal beauty and precision had captured Olivia's admiration, and she had personally secured the dancer for the event months in advance. Everything was meticulously planned, down to the champagne flutes and floral arrangements. The Edwards name was synonymous with elegance and tradition, and Olivia was determined to maintain that reputation. Her husband, Henry Edwards, entered the room, adjusting his cufflinks. He was a man of few words, but his presence commanded respect. He glanced at Olivia's furrowed brow and arched an eyebrow. "Everything on track?" he asked, although he already knew the answer. Olivia wouldn't allow anything less. "Clara just confirmed yesterday. The guest list is finalized. I'd say we're in good shape," Olivia responded, though her tone lacked its usual certainty. Henry poured himself a coffee and took a seat. He knew his wife well enough to sense something was bothering her, despite her efforts to appear in control. "What's the matter?" he asked. Olivia hesitated, tapping her fingers on the desk. "It's nothing, just a feeling. This year feels different somehow. Maybe it's because we've invited the investor, Mr. Holden. There's more at stake, and we need everything to go perfectly." She looked up at her husband. "This gala could secure our legacy in the arts community." Henry nodded, understanding the pressure. The Edwards family had built their reputation on tradition, and any misstep, however minor, could cast a shadow on that reputation. "It will go smoothly," he reassured her. "It always does." Meanwhile, across town in a small ballet studio, 18-year-old Jasmine Davis stretched on the bar, the burn of her muscles both familiar and comforting. Ballet had been her life since she could walk, and the studio had become her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the harsh realities of the world outside. While other teenagers spent their weekends with friends or on social media, Jasmine was here, perfecting her form, pushing herself to new heights. The academy where she trained was one of the best in the city, but Jasmine had to fight for every opportunity. While her peers came from families that could easily afford the expensive tuition, Jasmine's single mother worked 2 jobs just to make ends meet. The ballet scholarship Jasmine had earned was her ticket to a future she had only dreamed of, a future where her talent would take her places her circumstances never could. Jasmine's dedication hadn't gone unnoticed. Miss Harper, her instructor and mentor, had watched the young dancers rise with pride. Jasmine's natural ability, combined with her relentless work ethic, had made her one of the Academy's most promising students. Her grace, strength, and expressive movements set her apart from the rest. But Miss Harper also knew the challenges Jasmine faced, especially as one of the few black dancers in a predominantly white institution. After class, Jasmine stayed behind to practice, her movements fluid and precise as she lost herself in the music. She was preparing for an upcoming competition, a chance to showcase her skills on a larger stage. As she leaped across the floor, she was interrupted by Miss Harper, who stood in the doorway, watching her with a thoughtful expression. "Jasmine, could I speak with you for a moment?" Miss Harper's tone was gentle, but there was an undercurrent of urgency in her voice. Jasmine stopped mid-pirouette, catching her breath as she walked over. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her brow furrowing slightly. Miss Harper hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "I have some news. Clara won't be able to perform at the Edwards Gala tonight." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. The Edwards Gala was one of the most prestigious events in the city, and Clara's performance had been highly anticipated. "What happened?" Jasmine asked, her voice laced with concern. "She's fallen ill. The Academy was asked to send a replacement, and I've recommended you." Jasmine's eyes widened. "Me? But you're ready, Jasmine. You've been ready. This is your chance to perform in front of some very influential people, including the Holden investor. It could open doors for you," Miss Harper said, her voice filled with encouragement. Jasmine felt a surge of excitement mixed with nervousness. She had dreamed of an opportunity like this, but the suddenness of it all made her stomach flip. "But what if they don't think I'm good enough?" she asked, the doubt creeping in. Miss Harper placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are good enough. You've worked harder than anyone here. Remember, talent and dedication are what matter, not who you are or where you come from. Go out there and show them why you deserve to be on that stage." Jasmine nodded, her nerves still fluttering, but now mixed with determination. She knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and she wasn't going to let it slip through her fingers. As she gathered her things, preparing to leave for the Edwards estate, a thought lingered in the back of her mind. Would the audience accept her? Or would they see only the color of her skin, the unfamiliar face in a world where tradition held tightly to its reins? Meanwhile, at the Edwards home, the final touches were being made as the first guests began to arrive. The grand ballroom, adorned with crystal chandeliers and floral arrangements, exuded opulence. Olivia, dressed in a stunning evening gown, made her way through the crowd, greeting guests and exchanging pleasantries. She had crafted this event to perfection, but her mind kept returning to the ballet performance. When the event coordinator approached her with news of Clara's illness and the Academy's chosen replacement, Olivia's smile faltered. "A student?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Are you sure she's up to the task?" "Yes, ma'am. The Academy assures us that she's very talented," the coordinator replied, sensing Olivia's unease. Olivia forced a smile, though a pit of doubt formed in her stomach. This was not what she had planned, and the unknown factor made her nervous. Still, there was no turning back now. She had to trust that everything would go smoothly. As Jasmine arrived at the estate, the grandeur of the event hit her in full force. She had never seen anything like it. The towering mansion, the elegantly dressed guests, the sheer opulence of it all. She felt out of place, an outsider in a world that wasn't hers. But as she made her way inside, she reminded herself of Miss Harper's words. Her talent would speak for itself. Little did Jasmine know, the night ahead would test not only her abilities as a dancer, but also her resilience in the face of prejudice. The stage was set, but the real performance had yet to begin. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the Edwards estate was bathed in the warm glow of lanterns and candlelight. The driveway was lined with expensive cars, and guests in their finest attire streamed through the grand entrance, eager to be part of the event that had become a staple of the city's social calendar. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with a mixture of excitement and expectation, though beneath the polished surface, tensions simmered. Jasmine stepped out of the car that had been sent to escort her, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the bag, holding her ballet shoes. She stood for a moment, taking in the scene before her. The sprawling estate, the ornate decorations, the guests who moved with an air of effortless confidence. It felt like a different world, one that she had only ever glimpsed from a distance. Now she was about to step into it, and despite Miss Harper's reassurances, the weight of that reality pressed heavily on her chest. She adjusted her posture, standing a little taller, reminding herself that she belonged here, not because of who she was, but because of what she could do. She was a dancer, and tonight her skills were all that mattered. Taking a deep breath, Jasmine entered the estate, her steps firm but measured. Inside, Olivia Edwards moved through the ballroom, offering smiles and small talk to guests, but her mind remained on the upcoming performance. She had always prided herself on keeping everything under control, ensuring that nothing unexpected disrupted the meticulously planned evening. The news of Clara's replacement had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. What if the performance wasn't up to the standard she had promised? What if the replacement wasn't able to capture the elegance and refinement that Clara was known for? Her thoughts were interrupted when the event coordinator hurried over to her side. "Mrs. Edwards, the replacement dancer has arrived," she said quietly. Olivia's heart sank slightly as she glanced toward the entrance where Jasmine stood, looking both out of place and yet strangely composed. The contrast between Jasmine and the world she was now stepping into was undeniable. Jasmine's dark skin and humble demeanor seemed to clash with the grandeur of the estate and the elite company gathered within it. Olivia's initial reaction was one of unease, though she quickly masked it with a practiced smile. As Olivia approached, Jasmine could feel the weight of her gaze. She had been prepared for this moment, but nothing could have fully prepared her for the subtle, unspoken judgments that hung in the air. Olivia's posture was polite but guarded, her eyes scanning Jasmine as though trying to assess whether this young woman could possibly fill the shoes of Clara, the star ballerina she had so carefully chosen. "Good evening," Olivia said, her tone pleasant but formal. "I'm Olivia Edwards. I understand you'll be performing in Clara's place tonight?" "Yes, Mrs. Edwards," Jasmine replied, her voice steady despite the tension she could feel tightening in her chest. "I'm Jasmine Davis, from the City Ballet Academy." Olivia's lips curved into a thin smile. "Well, I'm sure you're quite talented if the Academy recommended you," she said, though her words felt more like an attempt to reassure herself than Jasmine. "Please, make yourself comfortable. The performance will begin after dinner." Jasmine nodded, but as Olivia turned to rejoin her guests, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. She had expected some discomfort, but the unspoken disapproval in Olivia's eyes had hit harder than she anticipated. This was more than just a test of her talent. It felt like a test of her very identity, as if her presence here was somehow an anomaly that had to be justified. As Jasmine made her way backstage to prepare, she caught snippets of conversation from the guests, their murmured words brushing past her like whispers carried on the wind. "Did you see the replacement? She's different. Not quite what I expected. I wonder if she'll be able to pull it off. I hope this doesn't ruin the performance." The words stung, even though Jasmine had heard them all before, in different forms, in different places. This wasn't the first time she had been underestimated, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. But it still hurt, the way people could so easily reduce her to nothing more than an unexpected variable in their otherwise perfect world. Back in the ballroom, Olivia joined her husband Henry and a few close friends, her expression still carefully controlled, but tight with worry. She leaned in toward Henry and whispered, "I'm not sure about this. Clara was supposed to be the highlight of the evening, and now I'm worried." Henry glanced across the room toward the stage where the performance would take place. "She's just a replacement," he said, his tone pragmatic. "It'll be fine. People are here for the event, not just the ballet." Olivia nodded, though her anxiety didn't ease. For her, the gala was more than just an event. It was a reflection of the family's status, their commitment to the arts, and in some ways, their values. Everything needed to be perfect. As dinner was served, the guests settled into their seats, their conversations flowing over wine and carefully curated dishes. The ballroom sparkled with elegance, the soft glow of chandeliers casting a warm, golden light over the crowd. Yet beneath the surface, there was a tension, a sense of anticipation mixed with uncertainty. The unexpected change in the evening's entertainment had thrown a ripple through the otherwise smooth proceedings, and many guests couldn't help but wonder how the young replacement dancer would fare. Backstage, Jasmine sat alone in a small dressing room, lacing up her ballet shoes and focusing on her breathing. She had performed countless times before, but tonight felt different. The expectations were higher, the stakes more personal. She wasn't just dancing to prove her talent. She was dancing to break through the walls of prejudice that had been silently erected around her. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts, and Miss Harper stepped inside, her face warm with encouragement. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice soft. "Nervous," Jasmine admitted, her hands trembling slightly as she tied the ribbons on her shoes. "It's not just about the performance. I can feel the way they're looking at me." Miss Harper sighed, her expression tinged with sympathy. "I know, but remember why you're here. You're here because of your talent, because you've earned this. Don't let anyone take that away from you." Jasmine nodded, taking a deep breath. "I just want them to see me for who I am, not what they expect me to be." "They will," Miss Harper said firmly. "Your dance will speak for you." As the time for the performance drew closer, the mood in the ballroom shifted. The dinner plates were cleared, and the lights dimmed as the guests turned their attention toward the stage. Olivia's heart raced as she took her seat in the front row, Henry beside her. She cast a glance toward the stage, her eyes narrowing slightly as she tried to suppress the lingering doubts. The music began, soft and haunting, as the spotlight illuminated the stage. Jasmine emerged from the wings, her movements graceful and fluid, her posture as poised as any seasoned professional. The audience fell silent, their attention drawn to the dancer, who moved with a quiet intensity that commanded the room. For a brief moment, Olivia forgot her worries. Her eyes locked on Jasmine as she danced with a beauty and precision that was impossible to ignore. Every step, every leap was executed with a mastery that belied Jasmine's youth. She wasn't just dancing, she was telling a story, her body a vessel for emotion and grace that transcended the expectations of the audience. But even as the room watched in awe, there were still whispers in the shadows. Some guests couldn't fully abandon their preconceived notions, their judgments clinging to them like a dark cloud. "She's better than I thought," one whispered. "Yes, but she's not Clara, is she?" Jasmine could feel the eyes on her, the judgments that still lingered, but she danced through them, her movements becoming more powerful, more expressive, as though she were pushing back against the weight of their scrutiny. She wasn't dancing for them anymore. She was dancing for herself, for the girl who had fought to be here, who had worked harder than anyone else to stand in this moment. And as she danced, something shifted in the room. The whispers grew quieter, the applause more genuine. Even Olivia, who had been so hesitant, found herself leaning forward in her seat, captivated by the performance unfolding before her. When the final note of the music rang out, Jasmine held her last pose, her chest rising and falling with the effort of the performance. The silence in the room was palpable. A brief moment of stillness before the audience erupted into applause, the sound filling the ballroom with an energy that felt undeniable. Jasmine took a bow, her heart pounding with relief and pride. She had done it. She had danced through the doubts, through the prejudice, through the judgments that had tried to hold her back. And in that moment, she realized that it didn't matter what the Edwards family or their guests had thought of her when she arrived. All that mattered was the way she had made them feel through her dance. The final echoes of the applause still lingered in the air as Jasmine took her last bow. She had given everything to that performance, leaving every ounce of her heart on the stage. The thunderous ovation was like a lifeline, momentarily silencing the doubt and fear that had been gnawing at her since the moment she walked through the doors of the Edwards estate. Her muscles were trembling, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer emotional weight of what she had just experienced. It wasn't just a ballet performance. It had been a battle against prejudice, judgment, and her own insecurities. As the curtains closed behind her, Jasmine walked backstage, her chest still heaving from the exertion. The sounds of applause continued, now muffled by the thick velvet curtains, but it was there, filling the air with a sense of validation she had long sought. She had proven herself, not just to the audience, but to herself. For the first time that evening, she allowed a small smile to touch her lips. Miss Harper, her mentor, was waiting for her just behind the curtains, Her eyes were bright with pride, and she immediately enveloped Jasmine in a tight hug. "You were magnificent," Harper whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I've never been prouder." Jasmine exhaled, the tension that had been coiled inside her like a spring finally beginning to unwind. "Thank you," she replied, her voice still shaky from the adrenaline. "I didn't think I'd make it through at first." "But you did," Miss Harper said firmly, pulling back to look at her student. "And you didn't just make it through. You soared. That was more than a performance, Jasmine. You showed them something they didn't expect to see, and you made them feel something they didn't expect to feel." Jasmine nodded, her heart still pounding as she processed the events of the evening. The fear that had gripped her earlier had loosened its hold, replaced by a sense of accomplishment. She had danced through the discomfort, through the whispers, through the unspoken judgments that had been cast her way, and she had won. But even in the afterglow of success, Jasmine couldn't shake the memory of the way she had been received when she first arrived. The tension in Olivia Edwards' voice, the wary glances from the guests, the subtle but unmistakable undercurrent of disapproval. It had been there, woven into the fabric of the evening, like a shadow that couldn't be shaken off entirely. Even now, as the applause rang in her ears, she couldn't fully escape the weight of that reality. As Jasmine gathered her things and prepared to leave the backstage area, she heard a soft knock on the door. Her heart skipped a beat, wondering if it was another guest or perhaps Olivia herself. She hesitated for a moment before opening the door, and to her surprise, it wasn't Olivia. It was a woman she had never met before, one of the guests from the gala, dressed in an elegant, deep blue evening gown. Her face was soft, but there was a hint of discomfort in her expression, as though she were unsure of how to approach Jasmine. "Hi," the woman said, her voice tentative. "I just wanted to say thank you." Jasmine blinked, taken aback. "Thank you?" The woman nodded, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "For your performance. It was beautiful. Truly. I wasn't sure what to expect when I heard there was a last-minute replacement, but you completely exceeded my expectations." Jasmine smiled, though the compliment was tinged with the reminder of the doubts that had hung over the evening. "Thank you," she replied, her voice measured. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." The woman hesitated, as though she wanted to say more but couldn't quite find the words. I think it's important to acknowledge when someone challenges your assumptions. And tonight, you did that for me. So, thank you for that, too." With that, the woman offered a small smile and turned to leave, disappearing into the bustle of the post-gala crowd. Jasmine stood there for a moment, absorbing the words. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than she had anticipated. One by one, the layers of prejudice that had been wrapped around her were beginning to unravel, slowly but surely. Meanwhile, in the grand ballroom, the guests were still buzzing with conversation. The gala had been a success, at least by external standards. The fundraising goals had been met, the investor had been impressed, and the evening had gone off without any major hitches. But beneath the surface, the performance had stirred something deeper. Olivia Edwards sat at the head of the room, her posture as composed as ever, though her mind was racing. She had watched Jasmine's performance with a mixture of awe and discomfort. There was no denying that the girl had talent, more than talent, really. Jasmine had commanded the stage with a grace and intensity that had captivated the entire room. But Olivia couldn't ignore the way her initial judgments had clouded her perception of the dancer before she had even set foot on stage. As the applause had echoed through the ballroom, Olivia found herself grappling with a sense of guilt she hadn't expected. She prided herself on being a woman of culture, someone who appreciated the arts and supported the idea of talent rising above all else. But tonight, she had been forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that her own biases had colored her view of Jasmine, even before the young dancer had a chance to prove herself. Henry, sitting beside her, seemed to sense his wife's internal struggle. He leaned in slightly, his voice low. "She was incredible, wasn't she?" Olivia nodded slowly, her fingers toying with the edge of her silk napkin. "Yes, she was." "I think we all underestimated her," Henry added, glancing around at the murmured conversations of the other guests. "But she showed us." Olivia exhaled, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. She had always believed in the meritocracy of the arts, that talent would always rise to the top, regardless of background. But tonight, she had been reminded that it wasn't always that simple. Talent was important, but so were the perceptions and biases that could shape someone's opportunities, or lack thereof. She had been so focused on creating a perfect evening, on maintaining the image of her family's legacy, that she had failed to recognize the deeper importance of what had happened tonight. As the evening drew to a close, the guests began to trickle out, their conversations still buzzing with excitement from the performance. Olivia stood at the entrance, bidding farewell to each guest with her usual grace and poise, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't shake the image of Jasmine on the stage, her movements so fluid and powerful, her expression so full of emotion. The young dancer had been more than just a replacement for Clara. She had been a revelation. When the last of the guests had finally departed, Olivia found herself alone in the quiet of the ballroom. The chandeliers above cast a soft, golden glow over the empty room, the remnants of the evening scattered across the tables like echoes of the night's events. She walked slowly to the center of the room, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floor, and stood there for a moment, lost in thought. Jasmine had left her mark, not just on the stage, but on Olivia's mind and heart. The young dancer had forced Olivia to confront her own prejudices, to see beyond the carefully constructed world she had built for herself. It wasn't just about art or talent, it was about humanity, about seeing people for who they truly were, rather than what society had conditioned her to expect. Olivia sighed, her gaze drifting toward the stage where Jasmine had danced. She knew she had a lot to think about, a lot to unpack. Change didn't come easily, especially for someone as set in her ways as Olivia. But tonight, something had shifted inside her, and she couldn't ignore it. The night had been a success, but it was the kind of success Olivia hadn't anticipated. It wasn't the applause or the compliments from the guests that lingered in her mind. It was the quiet, unspoken truth that Jasmine had revealed to her. The truth that the world was changing, and if Olivia wanted to stay relevant, she would need to change with it. The sun had long since set, and the guests had all gone home, but Olivia Edwards remained in the quiet ballroom. The grand chandeliers above her sparkled softly, casting a warm, golden glow over the room. The soft murmur of voices, clinking glasses, and distant laughter that had filled the air earlier had faded, leaving behind only a serene stillness. It was a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions that had been swirling in Olivia's mind since Jasmine's performance. The gala had gone off without any visible complications. By all outward appearances, it had been a resounding success. The charity had raised more than expected, the investor had been impressed, and the event had cemented the Edwards family's role as one of the key patrons of the arts in the community. But Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something much more profound had happened that evening, something she hadn't prepared for. Jasmine's performance lingered in her mind. The way the young dancer had moved across the stage, her grace, her precision, every step, every movement had been flawless. But it wasn't just the technical perfection of the performance that had struck Olivia. It was the passion, the emotion, the strength that had radiated from Jasmine's very core. It was the undeniable fact that Jasmine had not only belonged on that stage, but had commanded it. For Olivia, that realization had been unsettling. She had always considered herself an open-minded, cultured woman. She prided herself on her support of the arts, on her commitment to diversity in the programs she sponsored. But tonight, for the first time, she had been forced to confront the unspoken biases she carried with her. The assumptions she had made about Jasmine before she had even stepped onto the stage. The discomfort she had felt at the sight of someone who didn't quite fit the picture she had in mind. And now, as she stood alone in the grand ballroom, Olivia found herself grappling with the realization that she had been part of the problem. A soft knock at the door pulled Olivia from her thoughts. She turned, expecting to see one of the staff, but instead it was Jasmine, still dressed in her performance attire, though now with a light coat thrown over her shoulders. Her face was calm, though her eyes revealed a flicker of hesitation. Clearly, Jasmine hadn't expected to find Olivia here, alone, after everyone else had left. For a moment, they stood there in silence, the space between them charged with the weight of everything that had happened during the night. Olivia was the first to break the silence. "Jasmine," she said, her voice soft but steady, "I'm glad you're still here. I wanted to talk to you." Jasmine's expression remained polite but cautious. "Of course, Mrs. Edwards," she replied, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. She had been prepared to slip away quietly after the gala, unsure of how she fit into the world she had just performed for. But something about Olivia's tone suggested that this conversation wasn't just a polite exchange of pleasantries. Olivia gestured toward one of the chairs near the edge of the room. "Please, sit down. I'd like to speak with you about tonight." Jasmine hesitated for a moment before sitting, folding her hands neatly in her lap. She had no idea what to expect from this conversation. The night had been emotionally exhausting, from the stares and whispers when she arrived, to the rush of adrenaline on stage, to the flood of applause afterward. Now, as she sat across from Olivia Edwards, the woman who had so clearly questioned her place at this event, Jasmine braced herself for whatever was to come. Olivia took a deep breath, unsure of how to begin. She wasn't used to being vulnerable or to admitting fault. But something about Jasmine, her quiet strength, her grace under pressure, made Olivia realize that this conversation needed to happen. Not just for Jasmine's sake, but for her own. "I need to apologize," Olivia began, her voice unusually soft, "for the way I treated you when you arrived tonight." Jasmine's eyes widened slightly in surprise, though she remained composed. She hadn't expected an apology, especially not from someone like Olivia Edwards. Still, she stayed silent, waiting for Olivia to continue. "When I saw you for the first time," Olivia admitted, her gaze dropping slightly, "I made assumptions. Assumptions about who you were, about whether you belonged here. And that was wrong of me. I realize now that I was blinded by my own prejudices. I didn't see you for who you truly are." Jasmine's heart beat a little faster as Olivia's words sank in. She had felt the weight of those assumptions from the moment she stepped into the ballroom, but hearing Olivia acknowledge it out loud was something she hadn't expected. There was a quiet power in the vulnerability Olivia was showing. But Jasmine wasn't sure if an apology was enough to erase the discomfort and pain she had felt earlier. "I appreciate your honesty," Jasmine said carefully. "But it's not just about tonight, Mrs. Edwards. It's about what people see or don't see when they look at someone like me. I've spent my whole life working twice as hard to be seen for my talent, not for what I look like or where I come from." Olivia nodded, her expression pained as she listened. "I understand that," she said, though Jasmine could see that Olivia was only beginning to grasp the depth of what she was saying. "I've lived in a world where certain expectations are placed on people, where appearances and backgrounds matter more than they should. But you made me realize how wrong that is." The room fell into a brief silence as Olivia struggled to find the right words. She had always prided herself on being progressive, on supporting the arts in ways that uplifted those from different backgrounds. But tonight, she had been forced to see how much of that support was superficial, how much of it was rooted in her desire to maintain an image rather than to truly embrace the diversity of the world around her. "I've been so focused on keeping things perfect," Olivia said slowly, "that I didn't see what really matters. And tonight, you reminded me of that. Your performance was breathtaking, Jasmine, and not just because of your talent. You danced with a kind of passion and emotion that goes beyond technique. You made everyone in that room feel something, something real." Jasmine listened quietly, absorbing Olivia's words. She appreciated the compliment, but she knew that this conversation wasn't just about her performance. It was about something deeper, something more fundamental. "You're right that I danced with emotion," Jasmine said softly, her eyes meeting Olivia's. "But that emotion came from a place of struggle, of knowing that no matter how good I am, there are always going to be people who question whether I belong." Olivia's eyes flickered with guilt, and she looked down at her hands. "I was one of those people," she admitted quietly, "and I'm sorry for that." Jasmine exhaled, her heart softening slightly. She could see that Olivia's apology was sincere, and while it didn't erase the discomfort of the night, it was a step toward something better. I didn't come here tonight to prove anything to anyone, Jasmine continued, her voice steady. I came here to dance. But I know that for people like me, that's never enough. We always have to prove ourselves, in ways that others don't. Olivia nodded, her gaze filled with a newfound understanding. I see that now, she said quietly, and I want to do better. Not just for you, but for everyone who deserves to be seen for who they are, not for what others expect them to be. Jasmine smiled faintly, her guard beginning to lower. She had heard promises of change before, but something about Olivia's words felt different. Perhaps it was the raw vulnerability in her voice, or the way she had admitted her own biases without trying to defend herself. Whatever it was, Jasmine felt a small sense of hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, this conversation would lead to something real. I hope you do, Jasmine said gently, because there are so many others like me, talented, driven people, who are just waiting for the chance to be seen, to be given a chance without having to fight against the weight of assumptions. I will, Olivia promised, her voice filled with quiet determination. I owe it to you and to myself. For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the evening slowly dissipating as they shared in the quiet understanding that had finally formed between them. It wasn't a resolution to all the world's problems, but it was a start, a small step toward dismantling the walls of prejudice that had stood between them. As Jasmine stood to leave, Olivia rose as well, her expression warm but contemplative. Thank you, Olivia said softly, not just for your performance, but for opening my eyes. Jasmine smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing. Thank you for listening. With that, they parted ways. Two women from different worlds, connected by a single evening that had changed them both. Weeks passed since the night of the gala, but the memory of Jasmine's performance lingered, not just within the Edwards household, but throughout the city's artistic community. The event had been a resounding success, praised by many for its elegance and for the significant funds raised for the Arts Foundation. Yet, for a select few, the night had been more than just a social or charitable victory. It had been a catalyst for deeper reflection. Jasmine's name began to circulate within ballet circles as her performance became the topic of conversation at other social gatherings. People who had been present at the gala spoke of the emotion and power she had brought to the stage, how she had captivated the audience with her sheer talent. But for Jasmine, the aftermath of that night wasn't just about the recognition. It was about what the performance had taught her and what she had overcome. After the gala, new opportunities began to open up for her. Invites to perform at other high-profile events, offers for scholarships, and additional training from prestigious programs. It was everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed of. But behind the excitement, there was a quiet question that still lingered in her mind. Would these opportunities have come her way if not for the challenges she had faced that night? Would she have been seen if not for the weight of overcoming prejudice? As she returned to her rigorous training schedule at the academy, Jasmine found herself both grateful and conflicted. She had proved herself on that stage, not just as a replacement for Clara, but as a dancer in her own right. Still, the sting of the initial reception she had received from Olivia Edwards and her guests hadn't completely faded. Success, it seemed, didn't always erase the scars left behind by prejudice. One afternoon, as Jasmine stretched at the bar, lost in thought, Miss Harper approached her. The seasoned ballet instructor had watched Jasmine's growth with pride and concern, always mindful of the unique challenges her star pupil faced in an industry that was slow to change. "You've been quiet lately," Miss Harper said gently, leaning against the bear beside her. Jasmine paused mid-stretch, turning to face her mentor. "Just thinking." Miss Harper raised an eyebrow. "About?" Jasmine hesitated, then sighed. "About the gala. About everything that's happened since." Miss Harper nodded, as though she had been expecting this. "It was a big night for you. You handled it with grace, Jasmine. More grace than many others could have." "I know," Jasmine replied, her voice soft, "but I can't help wondering, did they really see me that night? Or did they just see a girl who proved them wrong?" Miss Harper's expression softened. She had always admired Jasmine's strength, but she also understood the weight of the burdens Jasmine carried, burdens that went beyond the technical challenges of ballet. You're asking if they've truly changed their minds or if they just feel guilty for their initial judgments. Jasmine nodded, grateful that Miss Harper understood without her having to explain. The truth is, Miss Harper said, her voice thoughtful, change is slow. You might have opened their eyes that night, but people don't change overnight. Some of them may have left that gala with new respect for you, but others, they may still be clinging to their old ideas. That's the reality. Jasmine nodded again, though a small part of her wished for a simpler answer. Wished that one performance could shatter every barrier, every bias. But she knew Miss Harper was right. Change didn't happen in a single night, no matter how powerful the moment might be. But, Miss Harper continued, her voice firm, what you did that night mattered. It mattered because you showed them something they didn't expect to see. You challenged their assumptions, and that's the first step toward real change. Whether or not they realize it yet, you planted a seed, and sometimes that's all we can do. Jasmine took a deep breath, letting Miss Harper's words sink in. She had always known that the path she was on wouldn't be easy. From the moment she had first laced up her ballet shoes, she had understood that she would have to fight for every opportunity, every recognition. But what Miss Harper said gave her hope, that even if the world didn't change overnight, she had the power to make people see things differently, if only for a moment. Thanks, Miss Harper, Jasmine said, offering a small but genuine smile. I needed to hear that. Anytime, Jasmine, Miss Harper replied, returning the smile. Now get back to work. You've got another performance coming up, and I expect nothing less than perfection. Jasmine laughed, the tension easing from her shoulders. She returned to her practice, her mind a little clearer, her heart a little lighter. Meanwhile, at the Edwards household, the weeks after the gala had been equally reflective, though in a very different way. Olivia Edwards found herself thinking about Jasmine more often than she expected. Her apology to the young dancer had been sincere, but it had left her with questions she hadn't been able to shake. She had always considered herself progressive, open-minded, and a champion of the arts. Yet, her reaction to Jasmine's arrival at the gala had revealed something about herself she wasn't proud of. Olivia had spent the weeks after the gala reading articles about representation in the arts, learning about the experiences of dancers from diverse backgrounds, and slowly but surely questioning her own place in the world she had curated so carefully. She had always believed that supporting the arts meant supporting talent, no matter where it came from. But now she realized that her version of support had been filtered through a lens of privilege she had never truly examined. One afternoon, as she sat in her study, Olivia decided she needed to do more. She couldn't simply let the night of the gala be the end of her journey. She had seen something in Jasmine, something that had not only moved her, but had made her realize how much she still had to learn. And if she was going to be a true patron of the arts, she needed to broaden her understanding of what that meant. That evening, Olivia reached for the phone and dialed a number she hadn't expected to call so soon. Hello, Jasmine? Olivia's voice was calm, but there was a quiet urgency beneath the surface. I was wondering if we could meet for coffee sometime. There's something I'd like to discuss with you. On the other end of the line, Jasmine was silent for a moment, surprised by the call. After the conversation they had shared after the gala, she hadn't expected to hear from Olivia again, at least not so soon. But something in Olivia's tone told her that this wasn't just a polite gesture. Sure, Jasmine replied, her curiosity piqued. I'd be happy to meet. A few days later, they sat across from each other at a small cafe. The atmosphere was quiet, intimate, with the soft clinking of cups and the hum of light conversation in the background. Jasmine studied Olivia, noting the subtle changes in her demeanor. There was a humility in the way Olivia carried herself now, a willingness to listen that hadn't been there the night of the gala. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the gala, Olivia began, her hands cradling a cup of tea, about the arts, about representation, and about my own role in all of it. Jasmine nodded, waiting for Olivia to continue. I realized that for years, I've been supporting the arts in a way that was safe, Olivia admitted. I've always prided myself on being a patron, on giving back. But I see now that I was only supporting what I was comfortable with. I wasn't challenging myself to see beyond the world I've always known. Jasmine listened, her expression thoughtful. She appreciated Olivia's honesty, but she was still unsure of where this conversation was headed. I want to do better, Olivia said, her voice soft but determined. And I'd like your help. Jasmine raised an eyebrow, intrigued. My help? Yes, Olivia replied. You opened my eyes, Jasmine, and now I want to use the platform I have to make real changes. I want to support dancers like you, dancers who don't always get the recognition they deserve. I want to create opportunities for underrepresented talent, and I'd like to work with you to make that happen. Jasmine sat back, surprised but impressed by Olivia's words. She had expected an apology, maybe a gesture of goodwill, but this was something bigger. I'm listening, Jasmine said, a small smile forming on her lips. Olivia smiled too, the weight of the past weeks lifting slightly from her shoulders. Together, we can make sure that the next generation of dancers doesn't have to fight so hard to be seen. We can create a world where talent is recognized for what it is, without the shadow of prejudice hanging over it. For the first time in a long time, Jasmine felt a sense of true hope. Maybe the world wouldn't change overnight. Maybe there were still battles to be fought. But here, sitting across from her, was a woman who was willing to listen, to learn, and to use her privilege for good. And that, Jasmine realized, was how real change began. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Click on the video now to watch. We appreciate your support, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.